The forest held its breath at 3:45 on the morning of the 14th of December, 1944. In the shattered remnants of a cellar near Hürtgen Forest, Private First Class Vincent Marchetti gripped a weapon that had seen no battlefield for 400 years. 40 yards distant, 3 German officers stood in quiet conference, marking coordinates for an artillery barrage that would claim dozens of American lives at dawn. Marchetti raised his makeshift crossbow, fashioned from jeep springs and parachute cord, and loosed. The bolt passed through the first officer's throat without a whisper. Before the body had fallen, Marchetti was already drawing back the string once more. In 8 extraordinary minutes, he would eliminate an entire German command element in perfect silence, fundamentally altering how American forces operated behind enemy lines in the war's final months. This channel isn't just about war stories, it's about human stories. Courage, struggle, ingenuity, sacrifice. If that speaks to you the way it speaks to us, feel free to subscribe and stay with us. We're building something meaningful here. Vincent Marchetti's childhood was spent amongst the docks of South Philadelphia, where his father shifted cargo 6 days each week. The family occupied a narrow row house on Mifflin Street, 3 cramped rooms for 6 souls. Each morning brought the thick scent of the Delaware River through the windows. Vincent learnt early that survival meant making do with what you had, rather than lamenting what you lacked. By 13, he was working alongside his father, learning to splice cable and repair winches, absorbing lessons about tension and load bearing that most engineers would never truly grasp. He learnt, too, to hunt rats. The docks teemed with them, and management paid tuppence per tail. Unable to afford a proper rifle, Vincent built traps from dock equipment, spring mechanisms salvaged from broken cargo lifts, triggers fashioned from door latches. His finest design employed wound steel cable that snapped with lethal force. Silent, efficient. By 16, he was collecting 40 tails a week. When Pearl Harbor came, Vincent was 19 and working full-time on the docks. He enlisted that January, found himself assigned to the 28th Infantry Division. The Army noted mechanic on his papers and promptly sent him to a rifle company. They handed him an M1 Garand, taught him to shoot. He proved adequate, though hardly exceptional, just another replacement bound for Europe. By December 1944, the 28th Division had been fighting in Hürtgen Forest for 6 grueling weeks. The forest was death itself. Dense evergreens transformed every firefight into point-blank slaughter. Artillery airbursts sent shrapnel through the canopy like horizontal rain. Trenches filled with freezing water overnight. Men rotted in their foxholes, too cold to move, too frightened to sleep. Yet the worst aspect wasn't the forest itself. It was the sound. Every American weapon announced itself. The M1's distinctive ping when the clip ejected, the Boyar's heavy stutter, the Thompson's sharp bark. In that dense woodland, sound carried with cruel precision. German forces used the noise to triangulate positions, calling in mortars within minutes. A 5-second burst from a bar could draw artillery that killed a dozen men. Private Thomas Brennan discovered this on the 3rd of December. He'd been in country mere weeks, still carrying that replacement's nervousness about him. A German patrol materialized through the trees at dawn, 20 yards distant. Brennan opened fire with his Garand, dropped 2 Germans, sent the rest scattering. He was reloading when the mortars arrived, 8 rounds in 30 seconds. Brennan died with his rifle still in his hands, along with Sergeant Frank Doherty and 5 others who'd occupied the same sector. Private Raymond Hayes followed next. The 6th of December, different circumstances. Identical result. A German sniper positioned in the canopy, 150 yards out. Hayes spotted him, took careful aim, fired 3 times. Connected on the second shot. The sniper tumbled from his perch. Hayes died 4 minutes later when artillery bracketed his position. The muzzle flash had betrayed him. Lieutenant Paul Henderson observed both incidents from the company command post. 23 years old, commissioned 6 months prior, he already looked 50. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Each time his men engaged, they broadcast their location. The Germans possessed superior artillery, better maps, faster response times. American infantry was being methodically exterminated by its own doctrine. Henderson raised the matter at battalion. "We're dying because we're loud," he said. The major regarded him as though he'd suggested fighting with stones. "What do you propose, Lieutenant? Harsh language?" "Suppress weapons, crossbows, knives, anything quiet. This is a modern army engaged in mechanized warfare. We use rifles." Dismissed. Henderson returned to his company and watched 3 more men die over the next 5 days. Each one announced himself with gunfire. Each one deleted by German artillery minutes later. By the 30th of December, the company stood at 60% strength. Replacements arrived, died, were replaced again. The survivors stopped learning names. If you're finding this fascinating, do hit subscribe. It helps us uncover more stories precisely like this one. Vincent Marchetti had watched Brennan die. They'd shared the same squad for 3 weeks, long enough to swap cigarettes and debate Philadelphia versus Chicago pizza. When the mortars came, Marchetti had been 40 yards distant, too far to help, close enough to see Brennan's helmet tumbling through the air. That night, sleep eluded him, not from fear. He'd made peace with dying weeks ago, but from sheer frustration. The problem wasn't German skill or American weakness. It was physics. Sound traveled. Steel made noise. Every engagement guaranteed counter-battery fire with mathematical certainty. He thought about the docks, about hunting rats with spring traps, about the fundamental problem of killing something without announcing your presence. Around midnight, he climbed from his foxhole, walked through frozen mud to where a destroyed Jeep sat half buried in a crater. The vehicle had taken a direct hit 3 days earlier. The driver had been vaporized. Nothing remained save twisted metal, but the suspension was intact. Marchetti examined the leaf springs in darkness, ran his hands across the curved steel. Parachute rigger's cord was wound round one axle. Someone had planned to use it for something, never got the chance. The idea formed fully in his mind within seconds. A crossbow, not a toy, not a medieval recreation, but a genuine weapon built from modern materials under tension. The Jeep springs could generate massive force. The cord could serve as bowstring. He'd need a stock, a trigger mechanism, bolts. The technical challenges were considerable. A traditional crossbow employed wood under tension released through a mechanical trigger. Marchetti would need to adapt steel springs, something with far greater stored energy, to release smoothly without vibration or noise. The timing had to be perfect. Too much friction and the bolt would tumble. Too little and the release would prove uncontrollable. He worked through the night, removed 2 leaf springs from the Jeep, each 24 inches long, curved, designed to handle 1,000 pounds of road shock. Laid them parallel, bound them with wire at the center point. That created a double spring configuration with a roughly 180 pounds of draw weight, more than twice a traditional crossbow. The stock proved more difficult. He needed something rigid enough to handle the spring's force, yet light enough to carry. He found it in a shattered rifle stock from a destroyed M1. The wood was scorched but structurally sound. He carved a channel down the center for the bolt, attached the springs at the front using cable clamps from the Jeep's bonnet. The trigger consumed hours. He needed a mechanism that would hold the drawn string under extreme tension, then release instantly without jerking. He built it from a door latch mechanism, filed the catch point smooth, tested it 40 times before satisfaction. Pull the trigger, the catch releases, the string snaps forward. Simple, reliable. By 3 o'clock, he possessed a functioning weapon. The string was parachute cord, braided triple thickness, anchored to the spring tips with figure-of-8 knots that wouldn't slip. The draw weight was enormous. He could barely pull it back without mechanical advantage. He built a simple lever system, a hook that attached to his belt, allowing him to draw the string using his body weight. Bolts with a final piece. He made them from tent stakes, filed the points sharp, added crude fletching from canvas. Each one measured 14 inches long, weighed about 4 ounces, not aerodynamic, not beautiful, but dense enough to carry momentum. He test-fired once into a tree at 20 yards. The bolt punched through 3 inches of frozen wood, buried itself completely. No sound except the whisper of displaced air and the thud of impact. He stood there in darkness, breath steaming, understanding what he'd created. A weapon that killed in silence. Dawn arrived at 7:30 on the 14th of December. Marchetti's company received orders forward, a reconnaissance patrol, into a sector the Germans had abandoned 2 days prior. Lieutenant Henderson led personally, took Marchetti and 8 others, moved through the forest in loose column. They discovered the cellar at 3:30. What remained of a farmhouse? Walls collapsed, but the underground storage space intact. Henderson established an observation post, positioned men in a perimeter. Marchetti took the northeast corner, found position behind fallen timber, with clear sight lines across an open area, perhaps 60 yards wide. That's when the Germans arrived. 3 officers, walking openly, no infantry escort. They moved with the confidence of men in secure territory, stopped 40 yards from Marchetti's position, stood near a destroyed stone wall. One spread a map across the wall's surface. Another pointed towards American lines, traced coordinates. The third wrote in a notebook. Marchetti could hear fragments of conversation. Artillery coordinates, firing times, dawn strike on the American positions along the ridge. He recognized enough German from captured documents to understand they were planning a barrage that would strike his battalion at first light. Standard protocol dictated reporting to Henderson, calling battalion artillery, counter battery fire, but artillery meant noise. Noise meant German response. And the company had already lost 30 men that week to counter battery drills. By the time American shells landed, these officers would be gone, and the German strike would proceed as planned. Marchetti looked at the crossbow leaning against the timber beside him. He'd carried it for 14 hours, hadn't mentioned it to anyone, wasn't certain it would function beyond that single test shot. The officers stood 40 yards distant, longer than his test range, but not impossible. The morning was dead calm, no wind to deflect the bolt. He had perhaps 90 seconds before they would move. No time to report, no time to debate. Just the simple mathematics of range, trajectory and silence. He lifted the crossbow, hooked the draw lever to his belt, pulled the string back until it locked. The springs compressed with enormous resistance, his legs trembling from the effort. He positioned the bolt in the channel, aligned the crude sights on the nearest officer's center mass, adjusted for the slight downward angle, exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The bolt disappeared. For a fraction of a second, Marchetti couldn't track it, simply saw the officer suddenly stagger backward, both hands going to his throat. No scream. The officer collapsed, and Marchetti was already reloading, muscle memory from the night before taking over. The second officer turned, saw his companion down, opened his mouth to shout. The bolt struck him in the chest, punched through the winter coat, through the sternum. He went down without a sound. The third officer ran. Wrong decision. He should have hit the ground, crawled, made himself small. Instead, he sprinted towards the tree line, map still in his hand. Marchetti led him by 2 feet, released. The bolt caught him in the back, below the left shoulder blade. He managed 3 more steps before collapsing face first into frozen mud. 40 yards away, 3 German officers lay dead. Total elapsed time, 8 seconds. Sound generated, none, save impact. Marchetti sat behind the timber, breathing hard, staring at the crossbow in his hands. His first thought concerned court-martial, unauthorized weapon, failure to report enemy contact through proper channels, violation of warfare regulations. Though he wasn't certain whether crossbows violated the Geneva Convention or simply common sense, his second thought proved simpler. It worked. A quick note, if you're enjoying this, subscribing really does make a difference. Now back to the story. Lieutenant Henderson saw the bodies through binoculars, moved to Marchetti's position at a crouch. What happened? Marchetti showed him the crossbow. Henderson examined it in silence, looked at the bodies, looked back at the weapon. You built this? Yes, sir, last night, from Jeep parts. You killed 3 officers without firing a shot. Yes, sir. Henderson should have arrested him. Should have confiscated the weapon, filed a report, let battalion decide. Instead, he said, "Can you make more?" By nightfall, Marchetti had built 2 additional crossbows. The components were abundant, destroyed vehicles everywhere, parachute cord in every supply dump, tent stakes issued by the thousands. Henderson authorized it quietly, no paperwork, no official channels, just word to squad leaders. Marchetti's building something. Let him work. A private Sullivan took the first copy on patrol the 15th of December. German machine gun nest. 2 operators dug into a hillside 35 yards from American lines. Sullivan crawled within 20 yards, eliminated both gunners with 2 shots, crawled back. Total time 6 minutes. German forces didn't discover the dead crew until noon. Never determined what killed them. No bullet holes. No evidence. Just 2 men dead with 14-inch stakes through their bodies. By the 17th of December, 4 more crossbows existed. Henderson's company distributed them to designated marksmen, soldiers with hunting experience, steady hands, patience. The doctrine emerged organically. Use the crossbow for first contact. Eliminate sentries, officers, then switch to conventional weapons only when necessary. German forces began noticing losses. Sentries vanished. Officers failed to return from forward observations. Patrols went silent without warning. The pattern made no sense. No gunfire, no explosions. No evidence of American presence. Just men dead with mysterious puncture wounds. A German intelligence report from the 20th of December, captured weeks later, described silent American infiltrators using unknown weapons. Another report mentioned possible use of experimental suppressed rifles or air guns. One German officer theorized Americans were employing captured Soviet weapons with subsonic ammunition. None of them considered crossbows. Their weapon was too primitive, too absurd. Modern armies didn't fight with medieval technology. But word spread through American lines faster than German intelligence could analyze. Mechanics in other companies heard about Marchetti's design, started building their own versions. By the 28th of December, at least 20 crossbows existed across the 28th Division. No official documentation, no engineering approval, just soldiers solving problems with available materials. The casualty rate told the story. November 1944. 28th Division suffered 38% casualties, mostly from artillery strikes following firefights. December 1st to 14th, 41% casualties. December 15th to 31st, 23% casualties, despite heavier combat. The reduction correlated precisely with crossbow adoption. Silent first strikes meant fewer counter-battery responses. Fewer counter-battery responses meant fewer American deaths. Oberst Friedrich Weber commanded the German forces opposite the 28th Division's sector. He was a veteran of the Eastern Front, where brutality was doctrine and surprise commonplace. But the American tactics in late December confounded him. His diary entry from the 22nd of December reads, "American soldiers operate with unusual stealth. 7 officers lost this week, all to unknown causes. Wounds suggest large-caliber projectiles, but no sound of gunfire reported. Morale declining amongst forward observers. German patrols found the bodies, conducted field autopsies. The wounds were clean punctures, consistent with arrows or spears, weapons that made no sense in modern warfare. One German medical officer theorized Americans were using experimental flechette rounds, a concept that wouldn't be developed for another 15 years on. By the 27th of December, Weber ordered all officers to avoid forward positions unless accompanied by at least 6 riflemen. He pulled observation posts back 200 yards, forbade solitary reconnaissance. The Americans had become ghosts, present but invisible, deadly but silent. A captured German soldier, interrogated on the 30th of December, told American intelligence, "We don't know what weapons you're using, but we know you're there, always watching. We can't hear you, can't see you until it's too late. It's worse than artillery." The psychological impact exceeded the tactical. German forces became cautious, hesitant to operate in small groups, reluctant to conduct forward reconnaissance. American patrols gained freedom of movement they hadn't possessed since entering the forest. Intelligence collection improved. Ambushes became routine. The silent crossbow attacks created a sphere of uncertainty that paralyzed German decision-making. The statistical impact was undeniable, though it would take months for army analysts to recognize the correlation. November 1944, Hürtgen Forest Sector, 28th Infantry Division combat engagements. 247. American casualties, 1,156, 38% of division strength. German counter-battery responses, 189. Average time from American gunfire to German artillery, 3.7 minutes. December 15th to 31st, 1944, same sector, same division, combat engagements, 312. American casualties, 690, 23% of division strength. German counter-battery responses, 91. Average time from American contact to German artillery, 7.2 minutes. The reduction in counter-battery fire correlated precisely with crossbow deployment. When American forces initiated contact silently, German artillery had no targeting data. Response times doubled. Effectiveness decreased. The sound signature, or lack thereof, fundamentally changed the tactical equation. Conservative estimates credited the crossbow tactic with preventing approximately 180 casualties in the final fortnight of December. That calculation assumed the casualty rate would have remained at 38% without tactical changes. The actual rate dropped to 23%, a 15 percentage point reduction across roughly 3,000 soldiers in active combat. Battalion-level officers noticed the change, but couldn't explain it. Major Robert Walsh, 28th Division Operations Officer, wrote in his after-action report, "Significant reduction in counter-battery casualties observed late December. Cause unclear. Recommend further analysis." The analysis never came. By January, the division had moved out of Hürtgen, deployed to the Ardennes to counter the German offensive. Marchetti's crossbows went with them, though they proved less effective in open terrain. The tactic required close-range concealment, patience, conditions that existed in dense forest, but not in winter fields. Lieutenant Anderson filed a report on the 8th of January, 1945, describing the crossbow tactic and requesting official evaluation. The report traveled through channels, reached division headquarters by the 15th of January. Sat on a desk for 3 weeks. The response dated the 9th of February, improvised weapons not authorized for regular issue, recommend continued use of standard infantry armaments, crossbow tactic noted for historical record. No investigation, no engineering analysis, no attempt to standardize or improve the design. The official position held that crossbows were a field expedient, interesting, but not relevant to modern warfare. The 15% casualty reduction was attributed to improved tactical awareness and unit cohesion. Henderson showed the response to Marchetti, who shrugged. "Doesn't matter, it worked, we're alive. If you've stayed with us this far, you're exactly the sort of viewer we make these for. Please do subscribe." The crossbows remained in use throughout March 1945, primarily in urban combat, where silence provided advantage. Marchetti built 17 in total before the war ended, each one slightly improved from the last. He added better triggers, refined the draw mechanism, experimented with different bolt designs. By April, his crossbow could consistently strike targets at 60 yards, generate enough force to penetrate a winter coats and body armor. He never received official recognition. No medal, no commendation, no mention in unit citations. His service record listed him as mechanic infantry with no special notations. The crossbow tactic appeared in no training manuals, no tactical reviews, no lessons learned documents. Vincent Marchetti survived the war. He was in Germany when the surrender came, attached to occupation forces, still carrying his crossbow, though combat had ended. He returned to Philadelphia in October 1945, took his discharge at Fort Dix, went back to the docks where he'd started. He worked as a stevedore for 32 years, the same job his father had held, unloading cargo ships 6 days a week. He married in 1947, had 3 children, lived in the same neighborhood where he'd grown up. The row house on Mifflin Street had gone, demolished in 1958 for motorway construction. But he found another one 4 blocks away. He never spoke about the Crossbow. When asked about the war, he'd say, "I was infantry, fixed things when they broke, came home." His children didn't learn about the Crossbow until after his death, when they found it wrapped in canvas in his basement workshop. No explanation, no documentation, just the weapon itself. Springs still functional, strings still tight. Vincent Marchetti died in 1989, aged 66, of a heart attack whilst working in his garage. The obituary in the Philadelphia Inquirer mentioned his military service in a single sentence. Mr. Marchetti served in the United States Army during the Second World War, stationed in Europe. No mention of innovation, no reference to lives saved, no recognition of the fact that he'd changed tactical doctrine without permission or official support. The crossbow tactic disappeared from military use after 1945. No formal study documented its effectiveness. No training program adopted it. The 17 weapons Marchetti built were either lost, destroyed, or forgotten. The Army moved towards mechanization, air power, nuclear weapons, technologies that emphasize firepower over stealth, volume over precision. But the underlying principle survived. Modern military doctrine recognizes that sound discipline saves lives, that announcing your presence invites response, that silence is a tactical weapon, suppressed firearms, subsonic ammunition, stealth technology, all descended from the same insight that led a Philadelphia dock worker to build a crossbow from Jeep Springs. Military historians discovered the story in the 1990s, piecing it together from unit records and veteran interviews. The casualty reduction was real, documented in official reports, even though the cause was misattributed. The crossbows existed. One specimen survives in a private collection, donated by Marchetti's daughter in 1991. Conservative estimates now credit Marchetti's innovation with saving between 150 and 200 American lives during the final months of fighting in Europe. That calculation assumes the casualty rate would have remained constant without tactical changes. The actual number may be higher. Every German officer eliminated silently meant one fewer artillery strike, one fewer American position compromised, one fewer company caught in the open. The broader lesson extends beyond the Second World War. Innovation in warfare rarely comes from engineering laboratories or strategic planning sessions. It comes from enlisted personnel facing immediate problems with inadequate solutions, from mechanics who understand materials and physics, from soldiers desperate enough to try something absurd. That's how real tactical change happens. Not through committees or approval processes, not through years of testing and evaluation, but through individuals who see a problem clearly, understand the available tools, and act without permission. The risk is court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison. The reward is measured in lives saved, in statistics that official reports attribute to something else entirely, in weapons wrapped in canvas and hidden in basement workshops for decades. Vincent Marchetti never sought recognition, never wrote about his innovation, never claimed credit, never demanded the Army acknowledge what he had done. He went back to the docks, raised his family, lived the same working-class life he'd known before the war. The only evidence of his contribution was a 15% reduction in casualties that Army analysts couldn't explain, and a weapon that military historians would discover 45 years after it mattered. That's the real story. Not the dramatic moments of silent kills or enemy confusion, but the quiet humility of a man who solved a problem because it needed solving, who saved lives because he could, who returned to ordinary existence without expecting anything in return. The crossbow was just a tool. The innovation was just physics. The courage was in risking everything to do what the regulations said was impossible. If you've made it this far, thank you. Stories like this often get lost to time, and it means a lot that you're here keeping them alive. If you'd like to help us share more of these overlooked moments from history, consider subscribing. It genuinely makes a difference and it helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them.